professor, founder of the interior design firm K-Kid, who spent the last 2.5 years elegantly wrestling the PPOHA grant beast. As executive director, Kristen, you quietly, unpretentiously, and always passionately complete us. Beckonings, a gesture that signals, directs, summons, or indicates agreement. Matthew Gillis. Inspired architect, awe-inspiring educator, principal of Gillis, marvelous travel companion, creator of sensually dense designs. I got that from his website. You are that rare breed, talented and agreeable. Matthew. He set up all these chairs. It's beautiful work. He's been bending people so the entire year preparing this symposium. And finally, perhaps the most important ingredient, our soundtrack. The accompaniment to all of the accomplishments that the interior architecture program has achieved in the past 15 years. He's already blushing. Randy Stauffer, former chair of the interior architecture program and now the provost of Woodbury University. There's no question, not a single one of us would be here today working together to build a better school without you leading the way. So now you know the players. Let me now set the scene with a brief overview about our academy. It's my job. Our interior design program at Woodbury College was launched in 1931. We're celebrating 85 years for our interior architecture program. That's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. So luckily we now fast forward to 1996 when Linda Polari was hired as chair of the program and oversaw the title change to interior architecture and interior design. In 2002, Randy Stauffer was appointed chair and presided over the first VAR, now CETA, and NASA accreditation visits of the program. Interior architecture has the dubious distinction of being the most accredited program at Woodbury University, with the resultant effect that our BFA in interiors and now our Master of Interior Architecture programs have been finely honed, wedded, sharpened by WASC and NASA and CETA and all of those distinguished organizations into programs of exceptional quality and thoughtful intentionality. In 2015, Christoph Horner was appointed chair of the Interior Architecture program following Kristen King in the role. And last year, in 2016, our Interior Architecture program was ranked by Design Intelligence as 15th out of over 190 accredited interior architecture programs in the nation. Minusculely endowed school, that's a pretty strong accomplishment. In 2014, the core team, Randy, Annie, Heather, and Kristen, launched our Master of Interior Architecture program. The same year, we successfully applied for a $2.5 million grant from the Department of Education to fund our proposal, supporting success in interior architecture. Woodbury University has the distinction of being a Hispanic-serving institution, with over 25% of our students Hispanic. The 5-year Promoting Post-Baccalaureate Opportunities for Hispanic Americans, the PPOHA grant, expands and enhances our MIA program, has underwritten several projects that Kristen's been managing, including our new lighting lab, a new materials testing lab, and this symposium. More than simply a coming out celebration, this symposium allows the faculty in the interior architecture program to declare its intentions. So as the conversation of this weekend unfolds, keep in mind that the script has been carefully crafted, a Gesamtkunstwerk, by the authors, but purposely designed to allow the many voices collected here to provide guidance and nudging and new intelligences, possibly new trajectories, new directions. So thank you all for joining us on this unmentionable journey. So to complete my housekeeping tasks, that's what a dean does, let me briefly review the itinerary for our unmentionable journey. Following tonight's Conjurings, we look forward to seeing you all here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning for breakfast, followed by an introduction at 9:45 a.m., flavorings at 10, lunch at 11:45, feelings at 1, trimmings at 2:45, beckonings at 4:30. I promise I won't sing. These are followed by the closing reception at 5:30, featuring the Unmentionables soundtrack by Peter Cully. So I now have the great pleasure of introducing Raymund Ryan, the moderator of the opening conversation, Conjurings. I understand you had a very eventful trip here from Pittsburgh to Los Angeles. I think something about a missing pilot. It seems like a particular important person to have as you fly across the country, with detours to several illogical places somewhere in between. I suspect your commute here in LA is just as complicated, but I'm so glad you're here and grateful for you to be here to introduce this panel. Raymund is curator of the Heinz Architectural Center at Pittsburgh Carnegie Museum of Art. Pittsburgh, you may or may not know this, is often ranked the first or second most livable city in America by The Economist. I didn't know that. A significant component of this ranking, of course, is the cultural renaissance that's been flourishing in its art institutions, including the Carnegie Museum, Andy Warhol Museum, who I understand is Raymund's patron saint. I love that. The Frick Art and Historical Center, Pittsburgh Center of the Arts, and the Mattress Factory. So contributing to this rich milieu, Raymund has curated several significant Pittsburgh exhibitions, including Michael Maltzan, Alternate Ground in 2005, Frank Lloyd Wright, Renewing the Legacy, in 2005, Gritty Brits, New London Architecture in 2007, Laboratory of Architecture, Fernando Romero, 2009, White Cube, Green Maze, New Art Landscapes, and Building Optimism, Public Space in South America, most recently. Raymund is arguably the foremost expert on Irish contemporary architecture. He received an honorary membership from the Royal Institute of the Architects of Ireland, a graduate at the University College of Dublin, and Yale. Ryan was first Irish Commissioner for the Venice Architecture Biennale, and the co-author of Building Tate Modern, author of Cool Construction, and frequent contributor to the Architectural Review, The Plan, and Architectural Island. Please join me in welcoming Ryan.
Thanks, Ingalill. It's very nice to be back in Los Angeles. I should mention perhaps that I lived here in the late 80s, working as an architect, and I began maybe part of the theme of this exhibition about interdisciplinary activity that I was working for Arthur Erickson, but as I see Clara going down there, Clara as well. But I also was encouraged to start writing, so I began writing for some of the London magazines, including The Face. I think I wrote one article for The Face in the entirety of the time I was here, but it was extremely useful for getting into nightclubs. So you see, these extraneous activities have benefits. My job this evening, I think, is to both introduce our speakers and then gather in a few moments for some Q&A. So I'm going to move quickly along because I know we're running a little bit late. I like very much the whole theme of this exhibition. I almost said there, I'm revealing my cards of this symposium, and of course I need to thank Annie for organising this. Annie I've known and Rick for a long time, and I should say I admire them very much, and I like enormously their modesty as well as the seriousness with which they attend to all of their professional work, whether it's designing buildings, making exhibitions, or teaching. So thanks Annie and thanks Rick. Our process with our schedule for this evening is that we have 3 speakers, and each one will make a small presentation for perhaps 5 or 6 minutes. So I'm going to try and introduce each one separately. I think that's the most cogent way of doing it. So our first speaker also has a Pittsburgh connection. I'm not a native Pittsburgher, but I've been there for 14 years, so I'm a semi-native Pittsburgher. And our first speaker is Bruce Bloch. Bruce is Professor of Cinematic Arts at USC, and we were chatting earlier and he mentioned that he's a CMU graduate of Carnegie Mellon University, our immediate neighbours, so it's nice to have meet these people with perhaps unexpected connections. Bruce has worked on whole host of movies. They're listed here that I'll just pinpoint perhaps. Something's Got to Give, The Parent Trap, Stuart Little, and did you work on Pretty in Pink? Yes. So I just happened to read today. I found in the Twitter sphere there's an Irish language tweet that comes up every day. So this week it's all about hues. So you'll be glad to know that in Irish, Pretty in Pink is Gohalin and Mondial, which is almost impossible to pronounce. Bruce is the author of many books, including The Visual Story, which he was mentioning earlier, has gone into many languages and multiple printings. So please welcome Bruce Ball.
There I am. Okay, that's terrible up there, but that's all right. I'm going to talk about the interior space in movies, the interior space that is required to tell a story. When we go to design a movie, we're designing a world. The world is dictated by that movie. There has to be certain conventions that are followed, but the world of the movie is what we have to design. And that starts with two main problems. The first one is simply the mechanics of what's going to be needed. And it's up to the designer to figure out not just where the doors and the windows are and things like that, but how every room is going to be set up in relation to another room so that the action in the script, which is very, very generalized, can seem natural and realistic and work. But the other important thing that has to come out of the design of a world is what is the world supposed to be about? Not the physics and the mechanics of the world, but what is the author of the script trying to say? How can the world reflect that? And it has to do it in all of the same ways that any pictorial design has to follow. What are the rules going to be for a world? And the more specific those rules are, the easier it becomes to design. But then there are two problems that occur. And the first one is that this world you design is going to be projected on a piece of plastic, a flat piece of plastic, whether it's on a screen of any size, something big, or even larger, it's still a two-dimensional screen. And it's not going to be viewed in person, ever, by anyone who cares about it. It's going to be torn down and removed, and what we will be left with is something on the screen. And so the basic problem is always, how do we take a flat two-dimensional surface and project something on it that has validity with the real world? And the way this designer solved the problem is not to work against it, but to use it instead. So we have what is a really very two-dimensional image on a two-dimensional screen. And at one end of the spatial spectrum for anything interior or exterior, that is where we begin. If the screen is flat, why try to make it anything else? Let's leave the screen flat and be done with it. And there are movies, worlds that are designed around that very idea. It is a flat world and it remains flat. Bergman was very, very big on what we call in movies flat space, and that is the constant emphasis of the two-dimensionality of the screen. But we can also trick the audience into thinking that this flat piece of plastic actually has depth. And that's something that occurs in real life, and something that occurs on this two-dimensional screen. And if we were to describe this to someone, we would say we're looking down the length of an aisle in a grocery store, and there are things that are very close and things that are very far away. But of course, they're not near or far, they're on a completely flat screen. So these conventions, what we call depth cues, are something that we borrow in motion pictures, but we borrow them from fine art and painting, because it's the same illusion that a painter is trying to create. This looks very deep, but it's the architecture and the cues that we believe tell us that something is far away or something that is close to us communicate with us. In this shot, it's really the people that are creating the depth. The convergence in the ground is helping, but it's the staging of the people. So here, it's not even quite the architecture, it's more the staging. And this brings us to the second point, which is our spaces and our interior designs are only as good as the photography. It's not something that happens in the real world. We walk around in the real world and we have a continuous roll of film that records everything that we see. An emotional picture has been selected, and everything that the designer has done has actually been altered and changed by the cinematographer because of the lens choice, because of the lighting, because of the angle of the camera. Here's an example where we have the illusion of depth on the screen, but it's all due to the lens and the staging. It's not the design at all. Here, we're actually taking architecture that exists and using it in a way and photographing it in a way that may never have been seen by the real world. They're only going to see it through the eye of the lens, and that makes it different. It allows us to take designs that are already out there and make them more graphic and more meaningful as it relates to the script. Now, this is a very famous movie. This is, of course, Dr. Strangelove. And the design that the production designer Ken Adam created for what is almost a third of the movie is extremely specific to this story. It fulfills the mechanical requirements of a table where all the world's leaders are sitting around the military and they're sitting around and discussing something, but it really has to do with the basic subject of the movie. The design of the room is exactly the same as what the subject is. And this is extraordinary work where the basic, fundamental, rudimentary idea of the movie has been brought into a picture that encapsulates everything that the story is actually about. Raiders of the Lost Ark begins with a long expository scene, and the scene is held in what is an auditorium, but a church. And it's churchy because it's religious, and it's large because what's going to happen is going to be huge. And they actually sit in this very public space talking about something very private that they say, hush, hush, and don't tell anyone, but they couldn't be in a more public place. And they actually give the entire exposition for the story and the entire plot of the story. It's not only explained here, but it's drawn on a board, and the book is open, and they show illustrations that look exactly like what the rest of the movie will be. Here, we have a movie about being double-crossed, and that's where it takes place. Here, in Francis Ford Coppola's movie, the space actually changes. Look at the ceiling, look at the height. And as the movie goes on, the ceiling is lowered because the pressure is gaining on the main protagonist. This is probably the most famous hotel hallway in the world. And it's all about inescapable evil. It represents inescapable and evil. And that's the design. That's why it's chosen. This is about the insignificance of the individual. And there it is. And then finally, the spaces can be circular, or square, or triangular. And the way we decide that is by how its emotional effect will impact the audience. And then the last thing that happens to all of our designs is they are edited together in a sequence. And once they're in a sequence, they take on yet a new meaning that the designer has to figure out beforehand, because once the pieces are put together, it will give itself a structure and create a visual story. So I hope we talk about all that a bit more tonight.
Thank you, Bruce. It's fantastic insight into construction of spaces and the spaces that we think we remember, but perhaps don't remember perfectly from viewing films. Our next speaker is Rebeca Mendez. Rebeca is an artist and a designer and professor of design and media arts here at UCLA. She has the interesting double hat, if I can put it that way, of being a graphic designer and an artist. And of course, in the spirit of this symposium, where different professions are mixing together to inform each other, and she herself is represents this intersectional practice. I noticed these many interesting images from Iceland, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about her Icelandic experience. And of course, Iceland is a country so far removed in many ways from Los Angeles that LA is a very built place, I think, is kind of the ultimate perhaps in terms of what you might think of as being nature. I should just very briefly mention that Rebeca has this year been awarded the AIGA Medal 2017, and also the National Design Award from the Curator, which of course is part of the Smithsonian museum system. So please welcome Rebeca Mendez.
So I think I'm going to be on this side. And I think, thank you Ray, thank you Annie for organizing everything and everyone that conspired to make this happen. Seems like it's a wonderful event. Now you saw my first line. Take me a few seconds. To address the idea of interior space, I'd like to start with this. Composer Karl-Heinz Stockhausen said, "We are all transistors in the literal sense. People always think they are in the world, but they never realize they are the world." What Stockhausen means is that there are no phenomena in the natural world that do not manifest themselves as vibratory or rhythmic phenomena. Those vibrations attack us, they modulate us, and in the end become us. I create immersive spaces that heighten our perception, so one can have an embodied experience. I will focus in two work series. One is called At Any Given Moment, and the other one Circumsolar. This is At Any Given Moment, Grasp 1. It's a series about, it has 6 works in it. It's a 16mm film projected as HD video at architectural scale with sound by composer Drew Schnur. In this work I ask, what do living things and physical phenomena take the form that they do? What are the essentials, the essential mechanisms of nature? The large-scale projection, with its engulfing force and meditative recurrent cycles, enter in relation with our human rhythms, resulting in a seemingly mutual modulation. They cross rhythmic tensions between similar elements, in this case the drops of water, modulated by variable speed and variable light conditions, create visual difference and reveal the patterns that one simple element produces through relationships and complex organization. So why do I choose to film with 16mm film? So much it has to do with the poetics and the gesture that film gives you, the materiality. So in a sense, I'm also thinking of the way in which this image will be received in the screen itself and in the space. So I'm emphasizing the embodied experience, even with the way in which I film and the apparatus I film with. This is At Any Given Moment, Fold 1. And I'll show you. In its space. And these loops continue loops. This is At Any Given Moment, Fold 1 with volcanic rock, a single-channel video installation that consists of a video projection of 22 feet by 19 feet that utilizes the entire space. Again, captured in 16mm film, and it has 2.5 tons of volcanic rock. And this is shown at the Williamson Gallery in Pasadena. I am interested in the nature of matter, its composition, organization, and behavior, its cycles and systems, but also I am interested when our sense of self-identity extends to a sense of self in relation to environments, to other animals, to viruses, to bacteria, to fungi, to physical forces such as gravity, and to time, In this case, because I shot it at 60 frames per second, it changes the way that we understand matter. And what I do is that these kinds of tonalities, I don't color correct the work at all. It is just a little bit of levels, but I'm a documentarian of findings, so going and being around nature and being on the site matters to me very much, and just capturing. And this is at any given moment grass 1 with burnt wood. Same single channel, same distance. It was also at the Williamson Gallery. And in this case, because it was in Pasadena, the Buckley Canyon had just burned. So it made sense to go and grab the material that it is another state, to show it in the context. This is Circumsolar Migration 3, single channel again. And it's a contemplation on migratory seabirds captured during their breeding season in Latravjärd, the westernmost point of Iceland, which is the largest bird cliff in all Europe, 14 kilometers long and up to 440 meters high, hosting up to 40% of the world's population of some species. At any moment, be it day or night, there are great bird migrations taking flight. Ornithologists estimate that more than 80 billion birds annually journey across the hemisphere. And what's amazing and what interests me is that even greater than the complex systems of weather, bird migration is the one unifying natural phenomenon in the world. So with this work, I began to explore the concept of the feeling of the sublime. Immanuel Kant said that the sublime was not so much a formal quality of some natural phenomenon, but more the conception, something that happens in the mind, an experience of limits. So what does this mean in terms of interior space? For me, the work that I do is not only that explores the outer space, but also the inner space, namely the realm of consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you for that very beautiful views of the work. And I love this sense, even from these brief images, of this vast outer world and the inner world that we all have in our individual heads. Our third speaker this evening also writes, I think, about an inner world. The book I'm reading at the moment, in part, is about an inner world and an outer world, and that's the book, My Hollywood. Mona Simpson grew up, I think, in Los Angeles. Did you? That's right. And educated at Berkeley, where she studied poetry. Attended Columbia and worked at the Paris Review. Did Mrs. Hines be involved with her? Yes, our benefactors in Pittsburgh is also the benefactors for the Paris Review. And has written many, many novels. So at the moment, I took this opportunity, and of course, what's so nice about being asked to take part in events like this is that it pushes you to go to the library in this case and develop some books. So in My Hollywood, which I'm in the middle of, and I'm not sure if it's My Hollywood or maybe it's several My Hollywoods, because there are two key characters in the book. But I'm intrigued in this book about one of them, My Hollywood writers, keeps going up to her room trying to do some work which is in an attic or an upper space. So it never seems to be exactly the room she wants, or at least she's very conscious of the heat in this particular space. Mona Simpson is the winner of many, many awards, including the Whiting Prize in France from the NEA at Guggenheim, the Lula Wallace Reader's Digest Prize, and most recently a Literature Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Please welcome Mona Simpson.
close this because I don't have any slides to project. Thank you to Annie, Ray, Bruce, Rebeca. I taught Russian literature at Cornell. Years before he published his great novel, Rebeca, he was supporting himself here in Ithaca. His midterm exam was a question of interior design. His syllabus instructed the students, by Monday, February 24th, you should have finished reading Anna Karenina, Tolstoy's 854-page novel translation. After which, you will have almost a month to reread it twice for the midterm exam. When the exam came, almost a month later, on March 19th, he asked the students only one question, and that question was, describe the wallpaper in Carolyn's bedroom. One wonders how many of the students actually passed the midterm. The answer does appear in the novel, in part 4, chapter 17. It was when Anna was expected to die, and she watches with a kind of rapturous relief as her husband shakes hands with her lover. They both sort of have a moment of forgiveness together over her impending grave illness. And just before the delirium sets in again, Anna points at the wallpaper and says, how tastelessly these flowers are done. Not at all like violets. That's a perfect example of interior space in fiction. What it really does in fiction is it opens an interiority of character. And really, that is all we as writers of novels and short stories have left. The long descriptions of landscape that Thomas Hardy lavished at the beginning of his great 19th century novels, the movies do them much, much better, as we've seen tonight. Even particular intimate descriptions of faces and bodies, of movements and faces and bodies and expressions, a good HBO close-up can capture more detail and more particularity. So consciousness, the interior of thought and sensation, is really what we have left and what we have to offer. So I'm just going to read a tiny little paragraph. Actually, from the novel you mentioned, even though it's not my most recent one, but it was the one that came to mind because it's about an office in a rented house that the composer is trying to work in after she has her first baby. The black kitchen depressed me. I would never work again, I thought, as if these two problems were equal. Do you ever just put him in the crib and go up to your office? My mother-in-law asked. We'd chosen this particular rental house because it had an upstairs room with windows on all four walls. Easterlings, we wanted light. Unfortunately, the windows didn't open, and by 10 o'clock, the room hit 70. By noon, 90. I led my mother-in-law up to show. Can you order shades? A reasonable question, but I wanted her to see. She'd once said, I want to be a perfect mother-in-law. This weekend alone, she bought us a set of stainless steel cutlery and 6 antique dessert plates. I loved those dessert plates. She'd noticed opposing sides in her daughter-in-law, and she picked the one she preferred. She chatted on about the advisability of live-in help so Paul and I could dash out for a romantic evening. A romantic evening. I looked at her. The baby cried. He seemed more furious than other babies, more bereft. I had no talent for this. Paul could make funny sounds like the track of a cartoon interrupting the baby's misery. But Paul wasn't here. The baby and I both felt astonished that he was stuck with me. You'll have shades installed and then just give him to a babysitter and get to work. But he cries. Then let him cry. A month later, shades installed, my husband called from the Fox lot. Go to work, he said on speakerphone. Go to your office and shut the door. I obeyed. I went up to my office, shut the door, and slept.
We have a few minutes, right? Of course. Yeah. I thought I might ask a few just very simple, maybe obvious, a few easy questions, and then open it up to the audience for difficult, tricky, complicated questions. I think Bruce and Mona, I was thinking both of your presentations and both of what you do. I'm curious about how much sort of a priori space making, space construction, space design do you do? To make a movie, I suppose you have to have a clear construct in mind, but in terms of writing a novel, I mean, do you make a doodle? How do you remember the layout of the house halfway through a novel?
You know, it's funny how much people both fill in those details and how much they leave empty. I recently, I teach as well, I teach at UCLA, and I taught a class in the great 19th century novel, Middlemarch, and the many characters in the book is, you know, upper middle class, sort of wealthy. But when I actually sort of researched it, actually, they had Downton Abbey-like houses, I mean, huge mansions with huge stacks, and I think we all actually project a great deal into, in terms of that kind of thing. So it depends. It's a funny thing how much detail you actually. I always know what I have in mind myself, but sometimes I don't like to get too particular because I like the reader to be able to project what he or she. It's kind of a collaborative art, so the reader needs to be able to have a place to put his or her vision within.
Well, and we have to be more physical because it's in front of the camera. But we pull terrible tricks on the audience too. In Something's Gotta Give, Diane Keaton's bedroom had a bathroom off of it. And when we finished the design of the house, we realized there was either going to be room for the bathroom or room for the kitchen. Yeah, because the layout of the house had to be a certain way because of some jokes that come up in the middle of the movie. And so we literally would reorganize the house depending on what room we were in. We were in Diane Keaton's bedroom. You could turn and see the bathroom, and there it was. And when we were in the kitchen, we simply, the bathroom lifted up. It just went straight out of the set. And we brought in the rest of the kitchen and did the scene. So we literally reorganized the set depending on where the camera was going to look. And no one's ever written us and said, wait a minute, isn't the kitchen in the bathroom?
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, well, now everyone knows. We would pull tricks like that because the physical relationships were critical to the camera and nothing else. It didn't matter. So we are not only rooted, but we changed the rooting depending only on the camera. What's the reality of it made no difference at all. You can't tell.
In making a movie, and when the set is designed in your mind, let's say, I'm curious about the role of lighting and atmosphere and how that might impact or change the final product.
It changes everything. Whoever's the last person to work on the image that the audience sees gets the last hit. So the production designer puts everything there that needs to be there, and then you hope that the cinematographer doesn't ruin your plan, which can happen in some cases. But it didn't happen in that movie. We were working well together. And yes, where to put the camera and how it's lit is going to change everything. If you don't see it, it's simply not there, and you can use that to your advantage. Citizen Kane, if you watch Orson Welles' great movie, the sets are very simple. There's almost nothing in most of them because they're in large, dark rooms, and they're just dark, and there'll be something in the distance that cues you that it's far away. But in between, there was absolutely no set at all. So the photography and the lighting will change the interiority of everything.
I'm thinking here about I like very much the fact that the department is the Department of Interior Architecture. I think it's a very interesting move from interior design to interior architecture. And I think in interior architecture, obviously, although architects might agree, but lighting is such a huge part of making the ambience of, for example, a restaurant, just to pick something. When we look at nature and thinking of Iceland seeming to be such a different place from Los Angeles, I'm just curious to find out what brought you there, what drew you to Iceland. I guess you're a repeat visitor, there's so much work made in Iceland. And can you tease out a little bit about the role of nature, or what perhaps we think nature is, and how nature and design perhaps intersect in your own work?
So, one of the things that brings me to places like Iceland and Svalbard or even the Sahara is that somehow matter seems to be moving at a different speed or a different way. So we are so familiar with nature that we ignore it. It's just a tree, a forest, it's just we know it. But when you go to a very young geological Iceland, you see rock, ice, that is matter moving at a different speed or in a different way. So it's a way to be able to be sensitized. When you wake up, and for example, for us when we shoot, a lot of the times if it's the summer, we end up shooting between midnight and 4 in the morning, and it's because it's the most beautiful light. First of all, the sun is really low, so of course you have magic light in an incredible way, but also fog comes in. And so looking for ways in which that which is familiar, to be able to make it unfamiliar. So making the known unknown is to me one of the most wonderful ways that I can, or wonderful things I look for in places like Iceland. The wind, for example, the speed of wind is out of this world. Like this grass looks normal, right? But the green one, I mean, I was holding my 16mm camera because it was ryegrass or something. It was very tall, so for it to move like the ocean, it needed to be moving really, really aggressively. So that is something that for me, in terms of the way that nature, we seem to ignore it because, it's just, we consume it, we just use it, we somehow kind of touch it here, but to actually inhabit it, to be there is a very, very different feeling. And when I've created some of the spaces in the installation, I started as maybe interior, like decorating with rocks, rationally, right? Rationally. I just start putting the truckloads of lava rock, and it looked horrible, wrong, it looked dead. And I was working Adam and I with bleeding hands, just crying after about 12 hours of moving this material around, and until I started throwing the rocks out of rage into the air, and I realized, thank you, gravity. Gravity. I was not working with it, and I was not working with my body, I was working with my mind, and that was destroying the potential for these to feel alive. So some of those things that we need to be shifting our mind to be able to be working with matter. And the same thing when we sometimes spend, days waiting for something to happen. And there's a series that is called Never Happened Again. Because by the time I saw something and I take the camera out and we've been camping in the cold and it's like, where is it? And the film is not, it's jammed and it's just not working. Wait, ready. It never happened again. But anyway,
So I like very much the titles of your work. Do you sit down and really spend a lot of time working on the titles, or do they come to you again in a kind of brainwave, in a flash?
I think the title, for me, frames the work. So it comes very fast at the beginning. It's my way to be able to anchor myself in what I'm doing for that specific work. Like right now I'm working on a porcelain piece that is about the fact that in the human genome only 10% is human and the rest is bacteria, animal, plant, all kinds of things. And so immediately the title is just, I am many. But it is the way that somehow the title itself just anchors me. So at any given moment, all of those things. Most of the times as I'm beginning to think of the work, the title just kind of tickles and comes in and it sticks and it sticks. And as I'm doing the work, it enters into almost like as a mantra. So it doesn't happen.
I think one of the interesting things, I think, for architectural designers in this day and age is the role of nature in construction. And why I like one reason why I like this idea of interior architecture, stressing architecture, is that when you think of architecture, it brings in the possibility of including nature, if only in small moments like gardens and backyards and flower pots and small bits and pieces. So I'm curious to know what some of the audience might think about the role of nature in design today, and particularly, I'm going back to the house in your book, My Hollywood, and the kind of claustrophobic feeling of this house, and this is the way I read it, and the neighbours living in very similar houses, a touch of maybe not exactly the Stepford vibes, but almost this kind of sense of American suburbia being cloned, let's say, to a certain degree, or with expectations from one neighbour to the next. Is that a theme? Is that fair in My Hollywood to read the experience of East Coast people coming to LA and experiencing the house like that?
Gosh, I don't know. I didn't think of that. I was writing that particular novel is about. I think if I'm really thinking of themes, it's about an immigrant nanny and her life, and what her perception of work was. She's here in Los Angeles working, taking care of someone else's children to pay for her own children's lives across the ocean. And so she's obviously working for something very urgent and very clearly essential. And the American woman is an artist who wouldn't, quote, have to work in the old-fashioned sense because her husband makes a living, so she could theoretically stay home with her baby. So it's about these two kinds of work and how these women, interact with each other. So that to me was the larger thing, but I'm sure lots of other things grow up on their own.
But there's a kind of, not sure if fraternity is the right word, maybe it's a sorority of Filipina helpers who all know each other. It's like
yes, they have a community.
A community, so it's not just my Hollywood, it's sort of our Hollywood, or maybe it's several of my Hollywoods.
Well, I had two babies, but when I had my first one, I used to go to the park, and I noticed that the nannies segregated themselves according to, the caregivers segregated themselves according to language, which makes perfect sense. So, yeah.
When it comes to films, and of course in Los Angeles, inevitably, certainly as a casual visitor, would think of the entire city as a kind of film construct, because we're so used to seeing it in films. And how often can Hollywood, let's say Hollywood, I mean Hollywood here as the industry, how often can it change? Can you point to examples where it's changed our perception of the city and the urban design of the city?
Well, the big shift, I think there was one big shift, if we're going to talk about visual, we'll stay there, and that was the death of the studio system. Because before that, everything happened on the back lot. There was no real world at all. Everything was built from scratch to the imagination of that particular studio. Each studio had its own look. Warner Brothers was very different from MGM, which was very different from Fox, for example. And so they each had their brand of the world, and everything was designed around that. And when the studio system died in the transition period in the 1960s, people started leaving the studio, and they would go out into the real world. And so there was a whole rebirth of what all movies were going to look like, because it actually looked like the real world, as opposed to if you were in Paris and working on the back lot at MGM, you were in Paris. And then you had to decide where you should be in Paris. It was appropriate for that particular movie, not only the mechanics of it, but what the interior of the story was actually going to be. So I think that was the big break. And we kind of go back and forth between that now. And when we design a world, generally the last thing the world would want is for anyone to think it was built. And there are movies that you've seen that you think took place in the real world, and they didn't at all. Everything was built. They went to a location, but then they covered everything that was there, or built a lot of things that weren't there. And because our style and the way we create a world is so different now, it looked real, not like a romanticized version of the world. But that's what the studio systems were trying to do, make a romantic version of the world to pull us out of the depression and all those other things. I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's all I'm going to say.
Of course, there are lots of overlaps between architects, maybe famed architects, who ended up becoming film directors and such like. It's an entire Broker exhibition, maybe right there. I think Antonioni studied architecture, but never actually graduated.
And Orson Welles used to say that when he came into the set, it was the character, and he wanted to light the set and figure out what the set said to him before he brought the actors in, because the set and the interiors were as important, if not more important, than the actors. And Hitchcock was the same way.
And Cedric Gibbons, Cedric Gibbons, who was so important in MGM, what he's often defined or characterized on the quote of Wikipedia as an Irish architect. I wrote a piece many years ago saying that in fact he was probably neither. I think he was kind of an invention, like many people.
That's right, yeah.
So it's maybe it's time to open some to the audience for some questions. So please holler, show hands.
I have many.
Right here. Shall I do the microphone?
Yeah.
So, Rebecca, how did you internalize this nature that you're studying? Because you really understand, it's like, it's not just, shrugging something up or, nature, token nature. You're really talking about understanding the kind of molecular interrelationships that we have with the world around us. Was that the Iceland experience that was heightened more for you there, or how did that come about? Because I think you need to give lessons in this story.
It definitely goes back way, way, way beyond that. I have two parents, both of them, well, of course, both chemical engineers. And I would ask any question, and immediately the tone of organic chemistry and the tone of inorganic chemistry would come out. So then I learned to understand nature in its physical chemical ways. So every way I enter the natural world is cycles, systems, how it works, how it performs. So for me to be able to even to inhabit that nature, it's because I'm already understanding it much more in its, like cross-related tensions of how is this thing emerging. That combined with us being very young and always camping in the jungle in Mexico, because my father loved archaeology. So, when I was very young, I was already, just living amongst this world. So it became my only, my way of relating to the world. And I think that sense of not only understanding how it functions, but feeling very, very comfortable at ease there, allows me to observe and observe and observe and observe and observe. And I think that contemplation, as a young one, I also contemplated way too much, I think, for many hours on the day. So that contemplation, that observation, when I started photographing, I didn't get that. When I started making films,
And when I started working with a 60mm camera, that's when I feel that the apparatus, viewpoint, but they all spoke of the same situation of matter. And the fact that I'm also thinking of fieldwork practice versus being in the lab, right? The idea of not only being at the studio and working, what you were talking about, but actually going to a place and having to walk to get there, having to camp there, having to live there, having to be amongst this, to just see if nature just somehow flickers, and then we're there present for it. So that idea of the artistic fieldwork practice puts me in that place a lot more.
Ready for that? Right. I was wondering this question is for all of the panelists, and it's how might the expertise or experiences of the other panelists affect your work? So, in what we've seen today, what excites you about the other panelists' work that you've seen today? So instead of maybe talking about yourself, maybe we can kind of talk about how someone else's work could affect yours in the future, now that we've had this discussion.
I can probably speak to that because I was very struck by both of you. So, first of all, did you do a tree?
A tree?
Yes. I feel like I've seen another piece of yours that was a tree.
There? Oh, you know what? I think you're looking at a synthetic tree like it is. It's Jennifer Steinkam's. Is it real tree or is it animation?
No, I think it's real tree.
Oh, okay, yes, no trees. I have all trees and trees. So all kinds of trees. Because I have shown you very well. So yes, yeah, I love that trees.
No, it really interesting. To me, it's fascinating that you kind of go and shoot stuff. Somehow give us the experience. So I don't know how you transmit that exactly. And I love that. It's so interesting that what you were saying about the studio system having romanticized the world to get us out of the depression. That makes so much sense that I've never thought of it exactly that way. And I miss that in a way. It's kind of beautiful when it's a little bit of both. I felt that kitchen, and what you were talking about was kind of romance to me. No, I think both of what you were saying. It's so different than sure.
Oh, we go next. What was great when hearing you read your work was fantastic, because in the script it would have been forward, so that she pauses at the stairs. That would be the and to see it drawn out and explained, but not fully explained at all, just enough so that we understand the motivation or her mood change or the reason for her conflict. The detail of it was so spectacular because we never get that in the script. A director can work that out with an actor, but it's never in the script. It's always removed because the things got to move along.
And it's a visual medium. I mean, you do get it in the movie from.
Well, anything that's internal has to be externalized in some way, or no one in the audience will know what it's supposed to be. But that's a terrible problem, and it's limiting because we can't always get those things out. And you hear them explain and work it's so tidy and succinct. It was incredible. And your stuff, we build everything sort of from scratch. And going into nature's like, all right, are there going to be bugs? That's what worries us.
I love the notion of there being a documentarian. That's so interesting.
Yes. And I have to ask you one question. The bird migration, why did you decide to turn it aside?
Yeah, I was interested in that too.
Okay, same thing, right? When you see a bird flying, when you see a horizon, it's like, it's just, we've seen it so many times. So for me to have you just pay attention a little bit, get a sense of, again, seeing something anew, and the known unknown.
It totally worked.
Yeah.
It seemed a little bit, I actually alarming. I mean, it seemed upsetting to me that they were going down.
And then the other thing as well is that, you know,
Where did they go down and up?
yeah,
Just-
they go up and down. It's just that you didn't see the 17 minutes.
Okay.
That's where it's going.
They're migrating.
Close
If they go one way, they have to go one way, they're migrating.
I love your description of yourself as a documentary. You get lots of footage and then edit. Yeah.
And it's interesting because there, in Atelier, we were just going for, you know, looking at this, filming a little bit, but we had other goals to go somewhere else. We spent 11 hours there, 10 hours, something like that. We didn't pee, we didn't eat, we didn't do anything. We just looked at this. And I was with all these cameras, and then suddenly, you know, I was looking at this, and the first thing I needed to do was just like to turn the camera. It was instinctual. But when I did that, it also emphasizes migration as code, because we see it more like trickling. And it's a code of evolution, the code for preservation. So I want you to also see that. I want you to see it a little bit more, almost like technical. So
It worked.
No, see, it also made me think of that great Walter Benjamin essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And it made me wonder, sort of, I mean, so you have this tight, you know, essence of all this film you've taken. Do you just give one of them to one museum, or could you could potentially have them it, I assume, in 15 different places, right? How does that work?
No, I have to make it into editions, and I think video work, even if it is digital and can be reproduced in every scale and in as many times, for it to have the value of art, right? I think that this is something that would do the editions, because otherwise a museum would not collect it. And so my editions are usually of 3 of certain works, and that's it. That they don't exist, they can't exist anywhere else. Sometimes there are editions of 7. So I think that more and more, as your career as an artist moves, first you start with a larger edition to make the work exist in the work more, but as you want your work to have more value, then you make editions of 5 or 3, and that's difficult.
What does that say about a studio that releases 5,000 copies of the same movie at the same time?
Problematic, but then I didn't get to actually comment on your question, right? For me, the way in which what I see and what I feel and that I'm trying to capture with all my senses, you know, the way you describe something with words, I'm living it. I'm immediately looking at all the different ways in which you are, and I'm there and smelling it. So it's very beautiful to find those words. I cannot come up with those words. So it's very beautiful to see something that is so granularly detailed and that you live every moment of it. That's quite beautiful. And in terms of constructing something, whenever I need to construct my worlds inside of the gallery, I need to understand flow, I need to understand timing, I need to understand all those things that you were talking about. So for me, when, for example, we were constructing these installations, we needed to think of what's going to happen, what's the experience that, from what point of view they're going to see it. Kids went immediately into the lava rock and just started playing with it, whereas the adults were very nicely behaved and they're just like, oh, I don't even get to the edge of the lava to touch it, right? No, there's like, I know that the director told us that people sat down there and had their lunches sometimes for a whole hour, which is very beautiful. It became a meditative space. But yeah, so it's just beautiful to hear other ways of experiencing.
I could see there's one brief time. I think you're going to show to our director. No? That's true. Okay. Maybe you can see it up the side if I may. I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I think that as one always hopes from a panel discussion, more closely, to look more closely, to think about nature more closely,
Feel more
and to feel more closely. So on that note,